So when I talk to people who know teeny weeny little bit about the Alexander technique, most of them immediately classify it as body work. That's interesting because almost every Alexander teacher I know says Alexander technique is not body work. In fact, all Alexander teachers pretty much drill to say we are not doing body work. We're teaching psychophysical awareness, we're teaching observation, inhibition, direction. We just happen to use our hands on our students most of the time during a lesson, but it's not body work. Well, there's a sociologist at the London School of Economics. Her name's Jennifer Tarr. She immersed herself in the Alexander technique world in London, at least part of the world. And she took some Alexander lessons. She sat in on a training course. She interviewed a lot of Alexander technique teachers and teacher trainees. And she wrote an essay about the sociology of Alexander teachers. And she wrote, while clearly a form of body work in the sense that it takes the body as its immediate site of labor involving intimate, messy contact with the frequently supine or naked body, its orifices or products through touch, close proximity. That's referring to body work in general. There are no naked bodies in classical Alexander technique teaching. An Alexander technique teacher will never ask you to disrobe. If he does so, he's going way outside the code of conduct. Anyway, Jen Tarr writes, the technique goes out of its way to avoid addressing the body as such, by positioning itself as holistic, in the sense that it works on the integrated body and mind. Alexander technique strives to overcome mind-body dualism by addressing the self. There's phrases such as the good use of the self, attest. So this distancing from the body has a twofold effect. Both emphasizes the conscious nature of the work, which lies at its core. It also detaches Alexander technique from a concern for the negative aspects of the body for which body work is stigmatized, such as its relation to sexuality, waste products, and decline. So how would a typical Alexander technique teacher relate to this observation? I think most teachers would say, well, Jennifer Tarr does not understand the Alexander technique. So when I hear that sort of thinking, it makes me feel at times like I've joined this harmless cult. So whenever an outsider makes an observation that differs with the dogma of a cult, the outsider is usually dismissed as not understanding. It's kind of the same way with the Seventh-day Adventist Christians that I grew up with, and the Marxists that I knew in college. Like, outside criticisms always come from a lack of understanding, according to insiders. So nobody who's not in the dance can possibly understand what we're doing. Well, I am not at all sure that Jennifer Tarr does not understand Alexander technique. So here's my opinion. My opinion is that Alexander technique is and is not body work. So how would this opinion of mine go over with my peers? I don't think it'd go over well at all. I think they'd say, Luke does not understand the Alexander technique. They'd dismiss me as a teacher. They wouldn't send me students. They wouldn't hire me to teach the technique. It's sort of opinion that could make one a pariah in the Alexander world. But oh well, I want the freedom to think out loud, even if it costs me a professional success. So I look at most of my peers and I think they're careerists. They tell their teachers what their teachers want to hear. They do what their teachers want them to do. They don't rock the boat. They develop relationships with their teachers, with their mentors. They use these relationships to get ahead. They refrain from saying anything publicly that could damage their careers. As a result, they have an easier time getting hired, getting ahead, and making money, moving forward socially than I do. So I kind of envy the careerist ease of success. But I'm also simultaneously resigned to being who I am. I'm 45 years old. I'm not always going to repeat back to my teachers what they want to hear. Sometimes I'll even risk saying something that they don't like. So I'm not going to just seal myself off here from saying anything that could damage my career. Though I think of myself as a truth seeker. In my more hyperbolic moments, I think I'm riding a white steed onto the battleground of the internet to fight for the right and the good. So let's say that I tried to raise a discussion with experienced Alexander technique teachers on Jennifer Tarr's observation that Alexander technique is bodywork. So a senior teacher who knows me knows my love of stirring things up, knows my love of attention, knows my love of controversy, would probably say something like this to me. Luke, I know you're a serious Alexander teacher. You stop wasting your time with these fringe opinions. Instead, spend your time developing ways of marketing the technique so that you can have lots of students and you can make money doing what you love. Now, I understand this response because it's smart. But unfortunately, I'm doomed to make my life difficult. So, why does any of this matter? So, imagine you're in a room filled with people doing the Alexander technique. So let's say half of them are teachers and half of them are students. You see all the teachers talking gently to their students, putting gentle hands on them and helping them to move with more ease. You'd likely think, this is erotic stuff. And you'd be right, this can be erotic stuff, yet in almost every 3-year, 1,600-hour Alexander technique teacher training program, you most likely go on 3 years without ever discussing the erotic nature of the work. Sure, you would learn the professional code of conduct for Alexander teachers, which precludes using the technique for seduction, forbids taking advantage of you students in any way, but there'd be no discussions of the erotic attractions that inevitably develop at times among some students, some teachers. So, I have a confession to make on this score. There are people who I never thought about in erotic ways until I started putting my hands on them regularly because of the technique. And suddenly these people who I never thought about in this way before suddenly became the most desirable objects in the world to me, and it's forever affected the way I thought and feel about them. It does not, however, affect my behavior. I play within the rules, and I intend to stay within the rules. So I get why Alexander training doesn't like to spend time here. It's the same reason that conservatives say you shouldn't talk about sex education to kids, because the more you talk to them about sex, the more likely they are to have it. So Alexander teachers tend to be very proper in their public selves. If you want an example, just watch a group of Alexander teachers trying to dance. They look like they've got brooms up their bums. I think this posturing by Alexander teachers is largely a result of these painful brooms that were just surgically implanted just before their graduation. So other causes might include insecurity. A lot of Alexander teachers are insecure because your use is constantly on display and is constantly being judged. Also, Alexander technique has no legal standing. 3, our founder, F.M. Alexander, said a lot of embarrassing and racist and eugenic things. So another reason for kind of the uptight nature of many Alexander technique teachers, I think it comes from the British origins. Like the technique really developed in Britain, and there's kind of a stiff upper lip, very proper British attitude that has affected Alexander teachers around the world. And also I think part of this proper removed attitude that Jennifer Tarr talks about is an overcompensation for work that is messing around with bodies all day as much as a massage therapist. So, do Alexander technique teachers ever have sex with their students? I'm sure it happens, but it is totally forbidden by the Code of Conduct. Code of Professional Conduct for Alexander teachers says you're never allowed to ask a student to undress. Obviously, no predatory sexual behavior is allowed. Any Alexander teacher who acted this way would be regarded by his peers as scum and would probably be expelled from the various professional Alexander technique professional societies. So, from the classical Alexander viewpoint, the good Alexander teacher simply inhibits his erotic impulses or any other inappropriate impulses towards his students, and that's the end of the matter. Another messy part of the hands-on physical work that we do is that many bodies are just decaying, they're old, they're grossly overweight, they respond stubbornly or awkwardly to our direction, so bodies are unpredictable. And that's perhaps why Alexander technique is chiefly oriented at the mind, trying to affect the way people think about their movement. That's more tangible and lasting than trying to just touch someone and give them a good feeling. So that's why Alexander teachers do not regard the technique as body work. I get that. I really do. I get it.